Oh, wait a minute. I think. Wait a minute. It's because it's doing it on both clients. I need a player who last grabbed. I think. Yeah. I think that's what's going on. Oh, wait. Cunt. Alright, fuck it. I don't need that shit then. Oh, fuck. It's a synchronicity problem. Things trying to happen all at once.
Yo, what up?
What's up, man?
Poppin'.
I just wanted to mention something I spotted that will definitely need to like be refactored with the transitions is the way we initialize with real time. Because we do it on awake, so like on first instantiation for a lot of things, but there's no like reinitialize methods. So like, you know, with the player, at the very least, you're gonna need to make sure that you get like the new real time, and probably a decent amount of other shit like the managers, or you just like register with the new managers. And you just move to that scene, and so it's like a decent amount of shit. I think that needs to be like reinitialized. I just made a milestone for it under scene transitions, and
Probably some issues. One thing. So awake versus start.
yeah,
Start is like basically enabled for that item versus awake is like scene related. Like it could be disabled, but awake is relevant. But I don't really know the difference, right?
that
But
is.
I'm assuming, because to your point, we do a lot of shit in awake.
Mhm.
But I'm assuming that if everything is handled by spawn instantiate in the new scene, all I have to do is like create a new scene, create the real-time conditions for it to be like the original scene, set up the local player. The local player should at this point have no like network player, because that should have been deleted. And I'm now like in a shell of the like last scene with no connection manager and just my local player.
Right.
And then I'm still like in my local player. So all of this shit is happening like in the background, like the setting up of like, hey, my new network player spawns, the scene spawns, all this stuff spawns. But all I see, because I should be appropriately placed or hopefully in some loading transition state, that like all I see is just myself appear in the scene with shit. But like in the background, like I did move scenes. I did spawn a new network player. I did set up new references for this new real-time avatar manager. Like on my local player at least. But everything in this new scene should be set up because it's like just joining a scene, like when we click play.
Right. Which makes sense. Which makes sense. Like, yeah, I guess it may not be as bad as I think it is, because we're not moving a whole lot of shit. So there's like, there's some scene dependent stuff that I've originally made like offline that, yeah, might just be worth being online so that we can instantiate it. Or, well, I don't know. I think we have to move like a decent, like a couple of things.
I mean, okay, so like, I mean, we could walk through it case by case because I'm sure it's not like more than like 5-10 things. But one question I did have about scenes is like, is it worthwhile to have like a root init scene that just stays with like managers if basically we're saying like there's going to be a certain amount of flexible scenes. Like my fear is that I delete a scene that has like managers and shit, and then like you're just kind of ass out. Um, I imagine like I have to keep like the space time game object that has the network manager, and there may be certain like lifetime just data management stuff like specific to your menu and avatar and shit that maybe we want to keep through these scene transitions. So I'm wondering like as far as scene stacking, like we can just have like a separate root scene with our managers. Like that's like a thing we can do.
Yeah, I mean, like, you mean kind of like how we did with the base scene in when we kind of had it with Get Set Go.
Yeah, like
the master scene.
yeah, like a base scene. Like even in the NGO, we had like the master scene, right, with all of that stuff. I'm more just like, can we concurrently like load scenes, like a master scene with nothing in it, just the managers?
Probably, yeah. That would make sense.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think so.
Bet. Okay. Well, I'll just try that because yeah, I was looking back at like single entry point stuff, and I guess really what I'm trying to like fully determine with some of the scene transition stuff is just like the actual structure of like what does it mean when I load this game from like APK start? Like, what scene do I go to? Like, I should go to some init scene. That scene should like know whether I'm a new person or returning by player prefs, and it should like set the rest of everything else up. And I imagine like we can like get to there, but yeah, like even just making sure single player works, because that's part of our requirement. Right? Is like we have to have some concept of single player. But I think there's like a normcore mode, like a literal mode where we can just have the same room, same real-time components, nothing changes, but we change an option on the real-time itself that says offline, and I think that works.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I'm assuming like you start the game and we start some room, like your single player room, that's literally like the room code name or some shit, maybe, and it's an offline room.
Right.
And then that room has some portal that can take you to a new room that is not an offline room. So it's still always a normcore real-time component model, whatever base system. But like sometimes it's online and other times it's actually switched off and it's just you. And I think maybe that works for single player. But yeah, from that point is when I would want to test literally everything that you're talking about like how do we set up scenes, like how do we transition to like the networked environment, because ideally this single player world is like our Unity environment. It's just the first place that you go to all the time.
Right.
So yeah, I can like just try that structure, and like I'll again, you said this is in a separate project, scene transition?
Yeah, in linear, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just make like some issues in it.
Yeah.
For me, but yeah, like that's still your project.
Word, yeah, it's all good.
All right.
Well, that's it, man. I'm gonna talk to Akon here in like 5 minutes, and I'll probably ping you like 20 minutes ish in. Yeah, roughly like 20 to 30 minutes in.
Shoot. All right,
man. I'll catch you in a bit.
Yeah.
Yo.
What's up, man?
What's up?
Just give me a couple of seconds here.
Did you talk with Abena about scene transitions? Was he there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright, okay,
Did you make a channel?
yes, hold on, I gotta open one. Let me invite him first.
Yo,
What's up?
this car is actually fire. This
Fun.
this red cat car.
Oh yeah, that's pretty fine. Okay, gotta wait for him to join the server.
All right. He's in.
Okay. All right. So can't fucking remember how to do this. Let me just make sure I know who has access to what. Let me open an interview channel. What is his fucking name? How do you spell it?
R-H-I, you mean Khan?
Yeah.
A-K and...
No. I mean the Discord name. I got it. Don't worry.
Okay.
All right. Chris, Savannah, KT, Nikita.
Wait, Nikita's gonna be here?
Nah, he just can access the channel if he wants.
Oh, okay.
All right. Is that voice channel down there?
Yes, I see it.
All right. Sweet.
All right,
See you
let's go there.
Okay.
Hey, how's it going?
What's up, Akon? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. So did you just finish a term at Dartmouth? Like, were you on this term?
No, I wasn't. I came home during the winter, so I have a couple terms to go.
Word. All right. Hell yeah. Well, so you're gonna be on during the summer then, right? Is that right?
No, actually, I'm not sure when I'm planning to go back yet.
Okay.
When or if, but probably
I feel
fall. Starting, yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. I don't endorse it, but I did do it.
Yeah.
But no, it's dope. Well, cool, man. So I think a couple of things kind of before we get rolling. Obviously, you know, we first met when Chris and I went up to talk. It was the first time I actually went up to talk at Dartmouth. That was like the first one I ever did. I've been fortunate to do it every term since, like in either XR or the new game dev course that they got.
Yeah.
Which has been a blast. So, you know, obviously that was was that January? Yeah, it was January. That was when like basically we had been introduced to KT, obviously, and in the fall, and we had hired him on. And you know, it's been a big thing for me since opening this studio to kind of always connect to the roots of what got me involved in VR to begin with, which was the program at Dartmouth. You know, there's practical components to that. I think the program's fantastic and breeds really, really talented people. But also, you know, there's sort of a goal that I would love, you know, ideally if we can grow as a studio and keep this, you know, ball rolling and keep getting to do this, I would love to help cement, you know, Dartmouth as a place to go to do this kind of work. You know, VR is a really specific medium, and it requires a really specific set of skills and a really specific sort of mindset, and there's no real book on how to do it right, especially as the technology just kind of keeps moving really fast, and the sort of consumer sentiment really changes and the demographics change. There's no like, there was an old school way of thinking and then that gets wiped out immediately, and then the new school gets wiped out immediately, and that leaves a really open opportunity for somewhere to be the place that you go to do this specific kind of work. People say you go to Cornell for computer graphics, you go to Stanford for robotics. It's like, it'd be cool if you can go to Dartmouth for virtual reality. And so that's my like 20-year like basically ambition for the relationship with the school, and why I go back to talk all the time, why we're always looking at who's interested in in the school, as far as either just working on whatever we're working on, interning, or even all the way up to working at the company full time. So when KT had brought up that you were really interested in just doing some work and getting some experience, obviously it was something that we're more than happy to kind of engage with in a lot of ways. So I think the way that this is really going to go is we're going to have a little conversation. I really just wanted to be sort of free-flowing. I would love to talk to you about, what you're interested in, the kind of work that you're interested in, where you feel like, KT's told me a lot about the work that you've obviously done together at Dartmouth, what your skill set really is as a designer. I'd love to hear like a little bit of that from you. And then also we're going to bring in our CTO, Abina, who is really like kind of just running a lot of the back end of the game and the multiplayer of the game, but we all work on the actual mechanics. And then we'll also probably bring in Chris, the CEO again, for you guys to talk a little bit more one-on-one. So hopefully you have like 45 minutes at least
Oh yeah,
to chat, because we're going to be here probably a little bit. So hopefully it'll just be a little bit of fun too. But any questions about anything I've just mentioned before we kind of roll in?
No, it's all very
I know
clear.
I threw just
Excited
a
to get
wall of
started.
text at you, so I can understand if but we'll just roll into it. I think first and foremost, as kind of a designer, where do you feel like, what brought you to working, doing the course at Dartmouth? What do you feel like you enjoyed the most about it? What do you feel like was something that you kind of contributed the most to, and you kind of felt like you grew the most on, as far as like your creativity, your practical skills? Feel free to take any of those threads and just run with it.
Yeah, totally. So I really like media of all kinds, like movies, and of course video games. And at Dartmouth, there's not really a lot of opportunities to make games, which is, it's nice that we have a new course now. But I saw AR, VR, and saw all the cool projects people were making. And it really appealed to me from that sense, like, okay, cool, I can make games and come out of it with like a sort of polished product of like a video. Like, I think that's what Mahoney really pushes us to do, is make like a cool experience that you can showcase in 5 minutes. And I actually got started with digital arts from animation, because I was like, all right, I want to tell stories, and animation seems like a good way to get started doing that. I moved to 3D modeling, and I was like, okay, hey, I have some of these skills that I can actually apply to making games. And to be perfectly honest, like, I wasn't expecting to enjoy VR as much as I ended up doing. Especially the first time I took it as like a designer, I'm not sure that it really clicked for me like I did when I took it as a dev, like, 23 versus 63. So, but still there were kind of those like seedlings of inspiration that were planted. So in 23, I was working with KT on Hypoxia.
Yeah, he hated it. That's what you just said.
No. It was, I really enjoyed designing like the game mechanics. We spent a lot of time like, how can we make this like both an open experience and also kind of like guide the user who is not really going to know what they're doing, especially if they don't have VR experience, right? And so kind of like after the fact, I was like, oh, and that's why VR is cool, because it provides like a sandbox where you can move around interactively and play this card game on your own terms versus like, I don't know, Balatro or something where it's like, boom, card, boom, next turn, boom, next move, you know what I mean? And what I got really into on Hypoxia was, I mean, I was responsible for designing the table, and let me see if I have that pulled up. Do you mind if I share my screen real
Go
quick?
for it, yeah.
Let's see. Cool, yeah. So I worked really hard on designing the table because that was like the main way you were going to interface with the game. And what I was interested in was kind of like a diegetic like user interface, because I just remember like using the Quest, I really hated like punching, like poking, and you know, all of that stuff. I mean, everybody hates that. And so you're thinking like, how can we make this more interesting? And it's like, okay, you have UI elements, you have like these cards that are on a screen, but it's not fun to like poke them around and it'll feel glitchy. So what if there's like a joystick and a button with haptic feedback, and to lock in your decision, you pull a lever? And that's where it started to really make sense to me. It's when Lori played our game at Technigala, and she was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's still fun. It's still fun just to interact with something that's like new, and it's not like simulating anything in the real world, but it's giving me something to do actively, like with my hands. And it just makes for like an entirely new type of experience. And like with the arms, right? I was like, all right, I could get like hand models and rig and animate them and you grab things, but this is VR, so I can make your arms look like Iron Man hands, and your hands aren't hands, they're balls of energy, because all we really needed was the grab interaction, and we put an oxygen bar on your arms so that you can like check it like a watch. And that's when it started to feel really cool for me. Yeah, and then I took 63, and I was like the team lead. I was developing, and I started to think about crafting. So we'd done like the open sandbox thing with Hypoxia, and I was like, all right, how can we make like a more contained experience? And something about me, I love horror stuff. I love horror movies, horror books, like horror games. I like watching playthroughs. I'm too much of a chicken, but that's what makes horror fun, right? Is being scared of it. And so I thought of this game of like Maynard, and I wanted to introduce narrative elements. I'm also a writer, so I kind of came up with this like story of like, you're a cultist and something's gone wrong during like a summoning, and now the monster's running around and trying to like kill all of you. So let me pull that up. And this is when I really started to think about like VR, like why VR, right? And so everything from the environmental design, it's like, okay, you still want the interactions to be kind of simple, so let's have this like staff that you just wave around, and that creates light and that creates noise, and you don't have to mess around with like controllers and buttons. It's just a simple grab interaction, and that's the gameplay. So we designed the staff. We had like colliders over here, so as you're walking through this hallway, these stones kind of come out at you, really giving you a sense of the space. They start to glow. You hear sound effects to your left and to your right. I scripted these bats that would like fly at you. I thought that was really cool. Like you're walking through a hallway and they fly past you, and this ended up being like the scariest thing. Another thing that VR does really well is like darkness, right? So you see the guy crawling over there. It's stopped playing. The guy crawling over there. This hallway is entirely dark, and then you just hear some sort of like rattling and groaning, and suddenly in your torchlight you see this guy emerge out of the cave, and that got people every time. And that project really made VR kind of make sense for me. I was like, all right, what does it mean to actually use space, keep interactions simple, and just do things that you couldn't do in like a normal horror game? It's like, okay, yeah, I guess I walk up to like that dark hallway and a guy comes crawling out, but it just feels completely different when you're in VR. You're surrounded by darkness, like you're actually there. And yeah, so I guess man, I just kind of blurted a lot out, but to sum all of that up, basically, I think that I'm really interested in thinking about like what works from like other games and like other media experiences and how they can be like changed because of VR. Like, I'm not interested in taking things and putting them in VR just for the sake of it being in VR, right? And that's what's cool about like the 10-week course at Dartmouth is like you have these ideas and you're encouraged to iterate on them really fast because you don't have like 3 months to like mess around and you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways, right? Like, you know, VR is we talk about internally a lot that, you know, VR is a different medium, right? It requires it requires a different sensibility, and you get a different set of benefits as a result. Like, it's on a sliding scale. I think every fundamental piece of media, it kind of boils down to similar primitives. And, you know, the one that I've talked about at Dartmouth that I know you're there for is obviously presence, right? It being a subconscious sort of cue to the user. And that is, you know, it's evident in film, it's evident in video games, it's even evident in books. It's just on a sliding scale. And VR, you know, really slides that scale to a strong degree and a visceral degree because of how much it links the experience to what is our kind of unconscious human tendencies. And that comes with it like a unique design challenge, but also a lot of benefit, right? It's why the concept of the social sandbox is really uniquely sort of beneficial or uniquely successful in VR. You know, there's been a couple that have been successful outside, you know, like Minecraft being the big one. But Minecraft, you know, fundamentally, before it was a social sandbox, it was a solo sandbox. You know, it was this really big, like, they had to put in all this extra stuff. They had to really pack it full of content in order for you to kind of fundamentally enjoy it and all these different mechanics. Whereas the most simple VR sandbox can really be a fraction of a percent of that. And the moment you stick somebody else in there, you see playtests just move to like a higher dimension. I mean, it kind of goes beyond what is often called a friend slop, right? Like games that just rely on you having friends to play them. It's a fundamentally different kind of concept. You can have a single player game that's still like kind of works in the same way, right? You know, people will play it in a different way and for a different duration. And you know, that's always been a really appealing thing for me. It's been a really big thing for, you know, the studio. You know, KT can certainly talk about me to some extent irrationally fighting for mechanics that uphold that, even if they don't seem super practical. Yeah, so it's, you know, I think I'm really curious about how your sort of fascination with horror, because it's a big thing for me. I love horror games. I love horror movies. Like, you know, The Evil Within, Dead Space are like two of my favorite like standalone games, even though they have sequels, you know, of all time. And, you know, Silent Hill, the myriad of Resident Evils, and horror's a really hard thing. It's a really hard thing to do right. It's a really easy thing to, it's like shock horror can be easy, but like real sustained sort of dread or fear, the more complex emotions that come out of it are really hard to do. Like, how did you kind of approach that in the project that you did?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess I should start by talking about what got me interested in horror.
Yeah.
It's like I really like doing two things. I like making people laugh, and I like scaring people because I think it's funny. And there's just something special about like getting a visceral reaction out of somebody. It feels like a way of like connecting with like another person. It's like I did something that made you feel that way, and hopefully you got joy out of it. And that's what drew me to being really interested in horror. And so approaching that horror game, Maynard, I think like obviously there's like atmosphere and environment building, right? Sound is huge, darkness is huge, and taking away a lack of agency from the player was also huge. One of my big inspirations was Amnesia, The Dark Descent. That's one of the few horror games I've actually played because I was like, all right, I need to like play this if I'm gonna say that I'm interested in horror games. And you're like running around, you're hiding, and that's kind of the way that we approach the monster state machine. I didn't really talk about the monster, but basically the concept was you have this wand and you wave it and it emits noise, but you're in a completely dark underground environment otherwise. So you need light to navigate your way to the end of the game. But if you make sound, then the monster can hear you. Oh, the monster is blind, by the way.
Right.
So the monster can hear you and come to you. So the end game, like game loop that I was really interested in exploring is you wave the wand, you make light, you navigate, and then the monster makes its way to you, and then you stop, and you just have to stand completely still. Careful not to like step in a puddle or knock into a rock, because that'll also make noise and make the monster approach. And that's where the real like tension comes from, right? It's not from like a cheap jump scare or something. It's actually from like the quiet with the potential for a jump scare. And then of course you throw in all sorts of like horror ambience and sound effects and fog, and that just makes the experience 10 times creepier. And so it was just like focusing on that one simple game loop and seeing like kind of how far you can push it with like how many rocks can we put in, how many puddles can we put in. We want to make it actually difficult for the player to navigate by waving their wand. And that's kind of how I approached the horror. It's like you're not in any danger the whole time you're navigating through the sewer until you reach the final room. That's all about just getting you into that headspace of there's something out there. And yeah, the bats and the guy crawling out, and we had like rocks tumbling down. Like those are cheap jump scares, but
you always need a couple. Yeah, no,
you need a couple.
Yeah.
Even like the greats, like Hereditary, there's jump scares in that, but it builds up to like a sense of dread and doom at the end. That's the real payoff.
Yeah, one of my favorite, just in terms of sustained suspense, actually, films that I felt like nailed. It rarely ever paid off because you use something like a jump scare as like a reminder to the audience to, be on edge. But it was the Gift that was I think Jason Bateman. It's actually a thriller. It's like a PG-13 thriller, and the plot is very simple. It's just this guy and his wife move into this new house, and he meets this guy at the grocery store that turned out to be somebody he used to bully in like middle school, and the guy's held a grudge forever, right? And he just sort of like takes over this guy's life, and it's never like you're just on edge the whole film, but there's no viscerality to it really. There's very few moments in the film where it's like it's actually disturbing. But it delivers this constant feeling of being on edge. And so like that, it can be a really difficult thing to sustain. And something I'm really curious about is you mentioned darkness. When I think about darkness as a mechanic in some games, right, especially flat games, non-VR, right, it's a difficult thing to do because if you were to actually fade the screen all the way to black, right, the player is gonna think something's wrong, right? Are gonna think something's like broken, or like they're in a loading screen maybe, or they're gonna just check out because they're in their room. When you were in VR, did you try and push that like actual darkness further than you felt like you otherwise would have? You know, in a different kind of medium?
That's a good question. I think we did, also because we knew that nobody was going to be able to turn off the gamma,
right,
and cheat us out of our deserved scares. But I think that the way we addressed that was giving like your lamp like a sort of base glow. So it's like, okay, I can see a foot in front of me, and you wave it slightly, that radius expands, like we lerp it up a little bit. So you're like, all right, I'm in a space. You shake it fully, you get a glimpse of the room, you look around you, and then it fades back out. So what we did was we had those moments of like oppressive darkness where you can't make a noise, but it was like relatively easy to get a sense of the space. And I think that, like, if you think about like Amnesia or something, like unless you like pull your lantern out, you're kind of at the mercy of the game's like darkness mechanics. But because we had our light source kind of tied to your ability to like wave, how fast you wave, how long you wave it for, you give more control to the player over, okay, how much do I actually want to take this risk versus how much do I actually want to be able to see.
Right. No, that makes sense. It kind of reminds me of, there were a couple of games that there was this game that has been shown sort of recently, where you see with sound. It's like player's blind. I think one of them is called Blind Silence, and then the other one's called something else or something.
It's something to do with echolocation, right? You toss it and you see the ripples. Yeah.
Right, and but it has that similar effect of like there's a drawback to trying to see, right? Because if you do, like you know, it's sort of like super hot. You sort of like you avert that that danger. No, that's a really, really cool mechanic. I'm sure it was probably really fun. I'd love to play it myself if you have a copy laying around.
Oh yeah, I have an APK over here.
Word. Well, yeah, definitely got to send it over. Yeah, so I think, segueing a little bit to talking about our game that we're currently making. I don't know how much KT's have told you about like the game, that we're currently making. Obviously, I mentioned a little bit about it when I first talked to Dartmouth. Since that talk, it's really evolved a lot, and a lot of that had to do with kind of playtest, but also looking at the demographic and what they are really interested in. The thing about VR and standalone VR especially is that it experienced a huge demographic shift during COVID. Prior to that, with the Quest 1 and the first sort of release of the Quest 2, the demographic was usually like 35 male. It was a gadget, and the player, they wanted a refined experience, right? They were sort of a veteran gamer. They wanted something that felt like a game that they were paying like a console price, essentially. They wanted something that felt kind of like a console. But during COVID, you had this big sort of generational shift where Meta ended up selling out about 25 million units of the Quest 2, but almost all of it, like above 80% of it, went to 15 and under. And so suddenly there was this big demographic shift, and that's where you got like these games like Gorilla Tag suddenly just exploding, right? Because it was a game that fundamentally appealed to a different mindset. And so what we were faced with was we had this sort of old version of VR that had these sort of presuppositions about what the user experience is supposed to be like, right? And what it's all about, and you saw that a lot with sort of a Half-Life Alyx type experience, right? Like you're twisting knobs, you're pulling little things. It's all very kinesthetic, and it's all like, it's neat, and it's trying to get like make you feel like really immersed or something like that. Whereas the once like games like kind of Gorilla Tag came out, this new generation developed like a whole new sensibility. First off, they had far fewer like accessibility concerns. Motion sickness wasn't really a thing. They're younger, they just get used to things a little quicker, maybe they have a higher tolerance. So the idea of needing to build around accessibility as a problem wasn't really as much of a thing. You had players whipping around these, scenes at really high speeds. And then, the second big thing was, the big importance really of what we like to call like the playground dynamic, which was essentially like, instead of players being given a really, really refined and specific objective to complete, they were presented with an area, like a place to go that had a lot of mechanics that they could use, and they make their own fun, right? It's like a playground, it's like there's a lot of different things you can climb on and mess with, and there's maybe even toys to mess around with, but ultimately the freedom is given to the player, a la like sort of Roblox, Minecraft. The agency is given to the player. There's a lot of autonomy. And that's where we saw these, you mix this social element with this sort of playground element. You saw these play sessions with these lobbies, eclipse, 2 to 3 hours of concurrent, which is really remarkable considering. And it's not to say that the new demographic wouldn't like other games necessarily. It's just that they've also developed this new sort of taste, I would say, about what they like in VR and what they're not super concerned with necessarily, right? When you look at games like Gorilla Tag and Yeeps, or fundamentally speaking, you're often looking at like a pared down experience by comparison to like Half-Life Alyx, or even some of the more like arcadey games like Super Hot or Pistol Whip that were in essence more refined. And so, there's this kind of new foundation that needs to get built on, where you need to accept, like, if you're going to make a multiplayer game, for instance, you want to accept like what's the fundamental thing that is getting a lot of these people together, and that starts with the social sandbox. And then how do you evolve that? Because there is still like you have to push the place, the medium somewhere, right? And so that's where, with Get Set Go, our game, we've really evolved. We started out this game making a round by round sort of hyper casual competitive game, sort of a la Fall Guys, where it's like it's designed to be queued up quick and in succession. It's 4 teams of 4. You build vehicles, you get wacky parts with sort of a mini game. You play like 3 miniature games, and then you do that sort of loop multiple times, and then there's a winner at the end of it. And the kind of conclusion we came to was the audience, the demographic, was not big enough, nor was it mature enough to handle a purely queue-based game. Where your only method of getting into the game was via some sort of matchmaking, right? Of the total user base of that log into standalone VR on a daily or weekly basis, it's about 12 million worldwide. It's not big. You compare that to like, there are like Roblox has more concurrent daily active users than that, right? Like it's like, it's not a huge market, and it's very easy to cycle through the whole thing and not get anywhere. And so what we found was that like it's a niche market, but like within that there's a really, really strong allegiance to certain games, right? Like we have me and my friends like have the game, the playground that we go to every day, and that's the place where we hang out. It's the place where we socialize. It's where we create content together, and there's a whole sort of Rolodex of things that tie in what represents engagement and retention in this sort of field. And so we knew that we had to make an adjustment to the base level of our game. You know, what's the base offering? And so the base offering had to be something that matched that. And that was where we shifted the base offering to the social sandbox. But we still want to push the field somewhere. You know, if this audience is going to mature, we have to give it a reason to mature. We have to come in with something fresh, and that something fresh can't just be another spin on the same thing, you know? So with our mechanics and with our, like, the way we treat social, the way we treat sort of the actual mechanics of the game, bringing a whole new offering to VR in the social sandbox world with vehicles and all that kind of stuff. But then still having some actual game loop to potentially enter that feels a little bit more structured was where we ended up, you know, in terms of kind of adding the game. But the interesting thing is that in that shift, you know, we have had to make a lot of changes to the mechanics and the scope and sort of visuals of our game. You know, when you start out making a very pointed competitive game, everything flows on those lines. You know, all the mechanics for, you know, our game's about building crazy cars out of crazy stuff and messing around with your friends, right? But when, you know, you're building a vehicle for a specific purpose, you know, all those things have to sort of align, and fairness always has to be taken into play, and, you know, all those things are sort of a part of the design challenge. But once you switch to a social sandbox, you have to sort of remove a lot of those really pointed design decisions or expand them, right? Things that used to be restrictive become unrestrictive, right? So, you know, that's where we, since we chatted in January to, you know, to really now, that's the evolution that the game's taken. We've had a couple of play tests for our game. We had one externally with our demographic about a month ago, and then we just had another one 2 weeks ago, and they went really well. Like, they were the first time we showed the game to people on the outside, and it was clear we were pressing on something that felt new and fresh and fun and unique. And essentially, by August 30th, we will be releasing an early access version of the game to the public that anybody can download and anybody can mess around with. So essentially, the next 3 months is all about taking a rough cut of what we've made in terms of the game and refining it to the level of polish that it needs to, you know, to be, you know, publicly viable. And there's a lot remaining in where we link a lot of these core mechanics to user experience and to, like, that feeling of even stylization and what makes our game kind of unique, the viscerality of it, that remains to be added in, but is wholly necessary, right? So to rewind a little bit, after I've just thrown a ton of stuff about you, about, like, the game and everything like that, what is Get Set Go really about? Get Set Go is a game where you build custom vehicles by spawning initially a base vehicle that is, you know, got a design, and there's a bunch of different ones that we have. And then you take parts that are in these little capsules and you chuck it at the vehicle. You shoot it at the vehicle, I should say, rather. That part then sort of poofs into place, And then you get extra freedom after that to like edit that part's sort of position, scale, size, and rotation to kind of craft a unique looking and functioning vehicle. These parts don't just serve aesthetics, they also change everything from something as simple as the vehicle stats to maybe even the physics, or offer you like ways to mess with other vehicles, like shooting stuff or pushing things. And then that, at a base level, exists in a sandbox where you start out with a base map. You know, in this case, we have like a food-themed map here that, you know, has stuff in it and it's got a vibe to it. But you can also add objects to the environment to kind of customize the environment. You can have obstacles, you could add ramps, you could add like, we even think about like, that's the way we can add races, you know, like a finish line that you can cross and it'll give you a nice little effect. Or if you want to play car soccer, we can have a goals that you can add in and a ball, and if you kick the ball into the goal, like, you know, it'll and essentially the goal is giving you as many permutations and as much freedom to exercise those permutations that, you know, you can fill out like a play session that feels like fun to you. And we can constantly and sort of endlessly supply the game with more content, either through new parts, new vehicles, new maps, new mechanics, all of the above. And then on top of that, we have the game mode, Get Set Go, which is a game mode that consists of 3 micro rounds. We have Get, Set, and Go. Get is where you basically race against other teams. You're on foot. You're kind of maneuvering through this grocery store to try and basically steal parts, these like capsules for your team. And then Set is where your team gets put into like their own little team section, and you got about 60 seconds to choose like to construct a car, you know, and what kind of stats do you need and what parts should you add. And then Go is all 4 teams are basically put on a sort of Rick and Morty style race where you're sort of racing through sections of worlds where portals sort of link it. You know, the goal scope of the game mode is, you know, all these cars are sort of together and you can jump between these cars and fuck with each other, and it's just, you know, supposed to be like a somewhat pointed view of what all the mechanics in the game could kind of build towards if you wanted to make that. So that's really the whole game. What we have currently is, you know, we have our functioning sandbox with, you know, our vehicle physics and our parts customization system, and obviously our multiplayer, and we are building in over the next 3 months, like essentially the polish that comes with all of that, you know, the polish that comes with all those little experiences, as well as like finishing, essentially migrating Get Set Go from an old netcode to a new one. We had to change. And so we built out kind of Get Set Go as a whole thing in a previous instantiation of the game, and we got to move all that over here. So it's a lot of things kind of happening in parallel. It's going to be like a very, very busy time. But, you know, when KT brought it to our attention that you were, you know, really interested in potentially taking part, was, you know, that we have a pretty big hole right now in, we have people making mechanics, we have a really talented person making a lot of art, you know, making a lot of assets, and what we don't have a specified person that can focus in that is essentially the technical art side of things. where FX sort of map design from a gameplay standpoint. So things like, this map here has got a bunch of colliders in it. How can they be simplified? How can they, what's the most optimal way for players to traverse? If we wanted to keep speed, how does that feel? That sort of iterative design there from a gameplay standpoint, not just a visual standpoint. And a lot of the like base level linkages for user experience, like when you throw a part on a car, like when you shoot a part, like what happens on the player as far as like effects, haptics, sound, to what does it feel like to shoot that part when the part actually hits the car? How does it sort of, right now we just have like a capsule corp style smoke effect that poofs the object into place, and that feels fun, but what accompanies that, that sort of discrete moment? There's a lot of discrete moments in the game that we could really push to a level of quality that isn't currently seen a whole lot in VR. That's the one thing that in these somewhat more simple games, there's not a whole lot of room for this like level of polish and sort of artistic flourish, if you want to call it, that could really be something that separates from the pack. But it's a full-time thing in and of itself. It really requires a lot of understanding of the technical side and what goes into that, but also what the goals are for user experience. You got to have an eye for the tone of the game. Obviously the tone of the game is very playful and humorous, and the user experience is also, it's even different for VR. Like, for instance, we don't have you don't grab like this. You don't reach out and grab things. You actually have like Poppy Playtime style hands that kind of like shoot out and grab stuff, and then like you shoot those parts away. We've simplified a lot of VR design, like concepts, for a lot of specific reasons. You're not like locked into a vehicle. You're actually like, it's a moving platform that you can walk around on, and while this thing's like flying all over the place. And so there's a lot of things that are unique for our game and unique for VR from a UX standpoint that, require a level of polish, I think, for us to stick the landing. And, it's something that I think I initially was going to take on, pretty heavily. And I think any sort of input, relief, or I would say like consultancy at the very least in the midst of those kind of decisions is, I think, where we saw you coming into play for kind of the summer, for however long, and beyond. So hearing literally the past 20 minutes of me just rambling, kind of what are some of your initial thoughts about like the game, the challenges we have? I've shown you very little, by comparison, but the goals of the game, how you feel like some of the user experience challenges. Is there anything that jumps out at you immediately in terms of like what you feel like, we really need to stick the landing that I've just sort of laid out to you?
Yeah. It, of course, sounds really cool. And I guess I can go through. So we, and just like would you welcome my input?
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So we started mainly talking about like the kind of balancing the sandbox and like the game loop side of things, right? And I really like the game loop that you kind of outlined, the get, set, and the go. I think like my impression from talking with KT was that it was going to be like a mainly sandbox focused experience. And to be perfectly honest, that was kind of like my main concern because I think that the social aspect you hit the nail on the head, of course. With like why games like Gorilla Tag and are successful.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that the kind of get set go game loop is like the perfect thing to launch with. And then it's almost like, hey, Fortnite took like 4 years to give you guys a sandbox. We're gonna give you one right now on
Hmm.
launch. Um, and so to that point, I think that to like really stick the landing, the get set go game loop, really needs to feel special, which is like exactly what you were saying with the effects, kind of streamlining the gameplay experience. That was like the main thing that I was kind of hearing and thinking is that it all has to feel like it blends kind of seamlessly. So whether that's like similar like aesthetic and tonal language throughout all three, keeping that same playful style, or like kind of seamless transitions to like, what if there's like you toss things into a giant shopping cart like when
Hmm.
you're in the store, and then you get out, you get to the shop, and your shopping cart is still over there, and you reach in and you grab things and you toss them.
Hmm.
Um, and I think another part of like keeping things fun and like streamlining the experience so that it all kind of makes sense
Hmm.
is like how can effects like actually like benefit the player. So what if like every player has like a different color, and when you throw like a part on, the part that you throw, because there's probably going to be a bunch of parts flying at the car at the same time, right?
Hmm.
The part that you throw on glows for a couple seconds with like your player color.
Right.
um, Things like that are what I was really thinking about. And that's like a way of like, making you feel kind of connected to like the car and the whole process. Yeah, that's really cool.
Hmm.
um, like throughout the whole gameplay process. And as far as like the kind of where you saw me coming in,
Hmm.
um, I think that that's exactly what I was hoping to do, is be there to, help add polish, kind of like playtest and see, okay, where can using the assets we already have, like I really like working in a box. So like a creative box, like how can we use what we already have in order to kind of like streamline and make the experience more fun and playful while adding like, effects and sound effects and stuff. That's like totally my jam. Like I remember during Hypoxia, we did so much play testing, like, okay, how can we what does the lever do for this? What does the joystick do
Hmm.
for this? Do we need a button? Things like that, just so that it felt like totally seamless. And once you get it, you get it. Um, and I think that also like having come up at like Dartmouth, like in
Hmm.
Dartmouth ARVR, again, like back to that 10 weeks thing, it forces you to like iterate and constantly be thinking about like every stage of like effects, sound effects of like how does this impact the final product. So I do think I kind of have like skill in that department of like foresight to how will this impact the final product. Um, so yeah, I know I jumped around a lot from like talking about what I got from your share about the game
Hmm.
to like I don't know, advocating for myself in an interview.
Yeah.
But
No, no, yeah.
Mhm.
Like I really, I think that brings up a lot of good points, right? Like it's I there's a lot in this game. Like, let me give you some context. For instance, like when we started this game, when we made Get Set Go, what you're looking at here is the customization system in the sandbox. When we first started, the game, the customization system was constrained. So you had a maximum amount of parts that you could put on a car, and the car was rigged up with attachment points, basically. So when you shot a part onto the car, we would find the nearest attachment point, and then there was a configuration for how that part looked and sat on that attachment point, so that it always looked right. You can create a unique permutation but it always looked right. It was like Scribble Knots. You know, it's like you could always like, there was this library and wealth of permutations, but they all fit together kind of nicely. And we did a lot of work on like rigging up these permutations. And that was because we needed to consider fairness, right? Like, you know, if you're playing a competitive game mode, you need to only have like a certain amount of attachment points. There needs to be balance. There needs to be all these things, right? That there are chief considerations. But when the basis for the game shifts to a sandbox, like the foundation, then restricting the creativity of the player from the attachments that they can make and how they can make them becomes a net negative, right? It becomes something that it'll leave the player wanting, like, why can't I just like change this? Can I like, mess more with it? And that's where we felt like, all right, we need to adjust this. We need to say like, there's really no limits. Maybe there's a technical limit, like, just so we don't crash the game, but like there's, the limit's much greater. The parts can be attached really anywhere on the mesh of the vehicle as long as they remain on the mesh, right? So as long as they like, we didn't enforce that in this playtest because we wanted to see if our environment thesis was right. But the way we do it now is when you throw a part on the car, we like, move out past the car a little bit, fire a raycast back in, and like find the normal of the mesh and like stick it on to the like wherever you shot it, basically, so that and then from there you can like move it around on the car and scale it up and rotate it and like, change whatever you want basically about the vehicle. And those kind of changes have a really big ripple in terms of like how the player, how that whole experience sort of happens, right? Like and like what it means and what information you get from it as a player, and we're still even kind of mining what that change and that shift has really meant. So yeah, I mean, like, it really cool to hear, like, your sort of input on it and, how you're approaching it. It's definitely, like, I think how we should do it, for sure. You may have noticed somebody else just jumped in here. This is Abina, our CTO. I can leave him to introduce himself a little bit more. But he, I would say, is making sure our game never breaks and we can actually connect with all the people around the world that we need to. But yeah, I'll leave the rest of you.
Yo, what's up? I don't know what y'all be talking about. I'm a little late, kind of a lot late, but my name is Obina. What's up? I don't want to mispronounce your name, so I'm gonna let you say your name. But
yeah. Oh, yeah. Nice to meet you. I'm Akand.
Akand, dope. Okay, nice to meet you virtually, of course. Yeah, don't want to interrupt with y'all's flow, what y'all were talking about, but just to introduce myself, yeah, I'm like CTO here. I guess that's what they call me. But yeah, I handle like a lot of the net code, making sure this game is gonna scale to, thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people. That sort of stuff piques my interest. I love games too, man. I love making games, playing games. Yeah, but I'm excited to work with you, meet you, and just learn more about you. Yeah.
So yeah, Abina's he's always very bashful about what he does, but he essentially he's gonna be the reason why I think our game delivers content in a different way. We when we started making Get Set Go and we looked at it from a free to play sort of, call it live service standpoint, because that was also a shift. We started out thinking that we're going to sell this game single A pricing, like $5.99, something like that, and then we're like, can't do it. This particular market, free to play is the king. And so we we were like, all right, well, how could we legitimately run that sort of model without it feeling forced or feeling like shoot in, making it feel like a fundamental part of the game. And then we sort of lucked out in that we had these really three core components that were sort of infinitely scalable. We had parts, we had vehicles, and we had the environment, right? All those things could be thematic. all those things could evolve, and all those things could be delivered sort of to the player. And we've developed this approach where players are going to have like kind of their inventory of like parts that they sort of own or have earned, and it's a socialized product. It's a lot like bringing a soccer ball to the playground. If I have a part that like I own and the other players in the lobby don't, the moment I bring it to the lobby, it becomes something that can be used, right? If anybody wanted to attach it to their cars or anything like that, I could give it to them, right? And on the back end, that requires a whole lot of really, really intuitive streaming of assets and sort of management of like the actual state of the game and database and kind of player sort of life cycles and all that kind of stuff. And so he's essentially been owning all of that. And so ideally, that makes make our game like a really cool and unique offering as well, because it's something that we can we can just have this crazy tempo for putting stuff into the game. Our artist Edouard, who is not here today because he's in Europe, is kind of insanely talented in his ability to produce, but also his ability to produce really, really efficient stuff. So everything you see in here, like the topology is so efficient. Like our poly counts are so low, and our optimizations as far as just visual artifacts and everything is so good that we can put so much stuff in the game that and still maintain a solid level of performance that we're really, really confident that that we can scale the content of this game to kind of huge degrees and the scope of this game, and leave more room in performance for the crazy stuff, kind of like physics and combat systems and weird little things like that. So yeah, I mean it's I think something else I'd really like to ask about is what do you feel like what do you feel like is the thing that goes the most underrated in a game, especially a VR game, from mechanics to sort of the user experience to FX to even just something none of the above, that maybe doesn't have a specific category. What do you feel like is something that often kind of goes unnoticed, but maybe things that you've played or things that you've made or even things that you've seen that you feel like separates those things?
Yeah. Really good question. I think a lot of the time, the things that are the most underrated are the ones that you don't notice because they're so baked in. So one of them is UI, where you don't even realize that it actually is UI. And I guess to bring the example to Get Set Go, it's if you organize a store, right, and you have for the get part, if you have different aisles that make sense intuitively, all right, people are going to want to go for the attacking things the most, so we're going to put those front and center, have their own aisle, and then have ways you can cut between aisles. You're basically running around an entire Amazon storefront, right? In flat world, that would be things you scroll through on a page. But in VR, it's you're navigating a menu. So I think that thinking about spatial organization in terms of UI and UX is something that you don't really notice a lot, but definitely can help with developing for VR. And another thing I think that goes underrated is small fun things in Repo, where you smack your friend, they become small, and then you grab them and you wiggle them around.
Yeah.
I think that thinking through those things from the very start is what sets apart a game. Like I played Repo for the first time with my friends who probably had like 15 hours each on it.
Mhm.
And I had no idea what I was doing, and I died all the time to that goddamn Freddy Fazbear looking dragon. And
Yeah.
uh, but I had a blast because I was smacking them and making them small and wiggling them around, and that was something that I just got intuitively.
Mhm.
Uh, that made it fun. So I think that baking those into the game in ways where it like makes sense and it's not just like, or what's that, Kevin? What's that moving game that we were playing?
Oh, move out.
Which one?
It's the where you gotta move out. It's
Moving
called
out.
Yeah,
moving out. Is that what it's
moving
called?
out. Yeah, you can like there's a slapping mechanic and you can slap
Mhm.
your friends and it's
Oh
just
yeah.
like stuff like that. Like, we were having a blast. We weren't even like playing the game. We were just slapping each other.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's another thing that's really underrated and underrated from like a building perspective. I think it's important to like not add those things on at the end, but to like see like where does it make sense in this world, in the stage of the game loop that you're in, like where you can like basically show another player like, hey, I see you and I'm doing something, I'm engaging with you outside the context of the game loop.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and it's just such an important thing in VR specifically too, right? Because players will just engage outside of the game loop a lot more, right? They just
right.
because you're not. One of the big challenges with VR obviously is that you're not locked into an input paradigm as much, right? Like even when you play a flat game, right, you're puppeting a player through your inputs, right? But there's always that joke that the Wii, the original Wii, was like you're the controller, but it's like yeah, right. But the in VR, it really is the at a base level, like even if it's only your camera, your camera is completely free to move, and you have to accept that, and you have to like accept that the player is going to do whatever the hell they want, and that encourages a level of like I don't know, rebelliousness, I guess if you want to call it that. Like they just sort of they push the bounds of what is possible in your game, or they assume that everything is possible, right? Like if they assume if I whack my player with my hands, something is going to happen, right? They just
Yeah,
assume that something is going to happen, right? So you kind of have to fulfill all these little like small interactions that often don't actually contribute anything to the game, but contribute to the presence of the game and like the tonal presence, right? And something that's been interesting for us, and I think would be interesting for you to experience also, is that how that relates to what's different about this new demographic, right? Like the tolerance for a sort of shitty VR is higher. Um, and it's an interesting sort of paradox. It's like you see games that do really well, like Blobtown, for instance, is a game that's been like really on the up and up. It's like, but it's a really small game. It's got like a solo developer, but the mechanic of it is pretty simple. You just go into a lobby and you get this like blob mechanic, which is this 3D paint tool, and you can just make these like 3D like paint models, and people make avatars, and it's just a creative sandbox basically. Um, but the way to access the majority of that stuff outside of the actual mechanic is entirely flat menus, right? It's entirely flat, right? And yet the players are actually prefer that, right? Because for them in that context, their priority is I need to like select my materials and I need to like select my stuff really fast. They're almost looking for optimality, right? Versus a game like Animal Company, which is also a game that's done really well recently. It's sort of a
hmm
Gorilla Tag like. Um, their UI is almost entirely physical, and it's almost in their sort of modus operandi is that everything in the game is interactive, right? Everything you grab, everything you like, it's always going to move and wiggle and like. And players in that game have really responded to that, and that because they've been sort of sat in their paradigm, and so it's where we kind of come in, and where it's like a unique challenge is that we're somewhere in the middle. We have a lot of things to do in the game, but we have a lot of things to add to the game. We have this sort of whole creative element, and it's about, I think, balancing that practicality and what the players like are sort of tolerant with and accept and even somewhat search for, while also like trying to elevate that experience to something that feels new and cool and like and satisfying or delightful in a different way. So yeah, it's a whole sort of different challenge. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's like you bring up a lot of really good points. Sorry for the fucking anime girl coming up on the screen here. It's it's a timer, but yeah. So, I think what I'd love to do, I know we've been almost talking for about an hour now, is before, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna like hop off, and Obina's gonna hop off, and Katie's gonna hop off. You're gonna have some time just to talk with Chris one-on-one. But before that, I just want to like ask you if you have any questions about kind of the game, anything about the product, anything that you want to know about like our feelings for the game, our strategy, what we want this to be, anything that you feel like you haven't heard from, everything that we've kind of talked about, recently.
Yeah. I guess how the one question I have is how far along are you guys in the sort of game loop? Like how concrete is the game loop right now? Not in terms of design, but in terms of like implementation.
Like Get Set Go or the actual like sandbox basis?
Sorry, Get Set Go.
So basically it's done in a completely incompatible paradigm. So
I see.
So you can say 0 in terms of our current implementation, which is very scary considering an early access build for this is launching in August, right? But we've outlined kind of the schedule for how we need to put all these pieces together. Practically speaking, very low. What does exist is the framework, right? What does exist is how like we have 4 teams of 4, how we have like how we have 3 defined stages, how the transitions in those stages are kind of supposed to feel like, we're no loading screens allowed. Like we actually have contractual obligations. So we're publishing this game with Meta. So Meta is a co-publisher on the game. And so we have some obligations to them as well that, when we started out making the game, we assigned. And like one of those, for instance, is that the Go section there's a procedural element to it. So when you actually, this has been built, it just hasn't been ported, was when you start out Go, you like go through an initial portal and we like load a tile basically that has like a track shape in it. And then that tile exists in a certain environment. So you're like in the food world or on the moon or something. But then there's procedural elements that sit on top of that. There are obstacles that can go in like any certain area on the road. There's like a weather that could sit on top of it. And those things will affect the driving experience, right? Even as simple as like you got to avoid those things to as like if it's raining, your like traction is going to be less. And you'll go through like 5 or 6 different stages basically where you're exposed to like a new world with a new set of challenges. So like those concepts are there and in many ways implemented that need to be ported, and that port is non-trivial. Like it is quite a substantial port, but it's we have a strong feeling for how that some of those sort of mechanics take place, but also like there are a lot of things that could be up in the air. Like we talked about like the grocery store thing with Get. That is somewhat of a recent thing. Like we had it originally as a more like a much quicker and more random moment in the game. When we first started making Get Set Go, we started out doing tabletop rules. So we made it essentially a tabletop game that we play online. And the mechanic forget was a lot. I don't know if you've ever watched Silent Library on MTV. It's a very like obscure reference, but okay. Anyway, the reference is basically like you have all these cards on the table and you gotta like slap a card to like claim it, basically. And it was very much a similar concept. We started out where there was a table and like all the players sat on the table and like the capsules would spawn on the table and you had to like grab one. And then we moved to like you're all situated in a room and like a tube comes down and like deposits a bunch of capsules on the floor, and then like walls come down and you gotta like rush in and grab them. And then we sort of moved further on to like, actually, let's do this supermarket sweep thing. Like, let's do this like where it's more of like, as the locomotion for the game developed like more complexity and like actually had some like interesting things in it that wasn't just like simple thumbstick locomotion, that it had like more dynamics to it. It was more justified to elevate that to be more of like a real mini game, you know? And so we also have like a combat system that sort of sits over this, and it's simple, but it changes things up, you know, and it could result in like the way Get is sort of set up needs to be slightly different practically, the design of it, the sort of scale of it, you know. And so there's a lot of things that I think could certainly be iterated quite quickly in terms of the actual like game mode approach and how it's implemented and how that sits with the tone of the game and in the user experience and gives this like building customization mechanic meaning, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of room to still like adjust, you know, and to be honest, even post launch, we envision that like these things might take different form. You know, we can only scope what we're capable of scoping, you know, being a small team in the short term, right? And so there are things that we have like essentially cut for these initial first few months that, you know, like we don't have parts that really do a whole lot of combat at the moment. We only really do like the basic things that could maybe affect physics, but beyond that, combat exists entirely on the player. But there's no reason why, given the capability and scope, like we shouldn't try and implement something that like a part that's like a turret that you could sit on and shoot stuff, and or you know like launch yourself out of a cannon or something, some weird shit, you know. Yeah. Like, and we have created a data model and a series of modular systems that give us a lot of flexibility, and we certainly intend to exercise that with player feedback and what seems to be doing well and what seems to be, you know, kind of falling flat in the weeks, months, you know, even after launch.
Awesome. No, that sounds like really exciting. That's kind of the answer that I was hoping for when I asked that question, because that's when you get into iterating, testing, playing, and grinding, and to like with a set deadline. So
yeah. Well, all right. Well, I mean, it's been a blast chatting. You know, taking up about an hour of your Thursday, and you're gonna have a little bit more. But so I'm gonna ping Chris to actually, let me do that right now. And so he's gonna talk to you a little bit more about like the practical of what this could look like, and what it actually, like the role could look like, the scope of it, the future of it, everything in between. Please feel free to ask any questions about the company, the goals of like the actual, you know, the long-term vision, what we're planning on doing with the game, where you could fit into all that kind of stuff. It's no holds bar kind of thing. Chris obviously has met you before, and so, you know, just definitely take that opportunity to talk a lot about that, and we'll probably loop back at some point pretty soon after that conversation. So let me just hope to God that he answers my ping and isn't like on the moon or something. Hold on, let me give him a ring. You guys hang out for a second. Oh shit.
How long have you
Yeah.
Oh, you go.
No. I'm all ears.
I was just gonna ask, how long have you been with OuterNimbus and Valid?
Yeah, so I'm one of the founders. So I guess from the beginning. But yeah, it's been an interesting ride. I mean, even like again, name change, it's just kind of focusing in on this game. But also we have like other efforts and endeavors in publishing games. So like we're very much rooted in the games industry. Yes, we have our flagship title, but like publishing titles is a thing that also goes on here. So, I mean, just learning about the business of games while we're making this game has been like a pleasure of mine. But yeah, I've been here from the jump. I actually know, so I don't know KT from before, but I know Rourke from, we had a crypto NFT startup before um, we got into this game world. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've talked to KT a little bit about like the publishing and um, like that side of things, and that sounds really cool too. So you're trying to find like smaller creators and help them like develop their games and bring them to market and stuff.
Yeah. Get them user bases, get that game monetized, just the whole thing. Just to see like the life cycle of these games. Like I come from like a traditional software background, so like think like web and companies like that. So like to see
Shit. Yo, are you at home or on a call or? Because wait, I'm saying hop in for Akon. Yeah.
Your
Alright.
year, I started doing like a film and digital arts program, and that really got me into like I've been like writing since I was like little, just like short stories and all that. Um, but then I got into like writing scripts and filming them, and I was really lucky that my school had that program. And in college, I switched to CS and digital arts. So I didn't really carry that on, other than just I had a bunch of friends who were film majors, and I worked on that. But yeah, I've been exploring that too recently. In the past few months, I've written two feature scripts, one with my friends.
yeah,
See if we can get those sold or something. I don't know.
yeah,
Sell
dude,
it
we
to
shot the
Netflix or
movie.
something.
That's
Yeah.
dope. That's dope.
Yeah, do you do? Did you give a TED talk by any chance?
Oh God. Oh God.
I thought it was good.
No, no. Thank you. No comment, dude. No comment though.
Uh,
Uh,
well, all right. So Chris just hopped in here, so we'll scatter for a little bit, but let you guys chat. But it's been a blast, man,
yeah, dude.
and look forward to chatting more soon. And so yeah, just hang out and we'll the rest of us will be in touch, but you guys chat.
Absolutely.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thanks for your time, guys. It was so
Yeah,
nice to
Yeah,
meet you,
dude.
Abina.
yeah.
Rourke, I need to talk more about some. I need more horror recs. I'm totally
Dude,
watching The Gift.
I'm there, man. I
Hell
got
yeah.
you for real. I got you.
All right.
All right, man. We'll catch you later. All right.
Cool. Take care.
Take care.
All right. Catch you,
Later.
KT.
Yeah.
Peace.
Bye.
Yeah.
Was it?
Um. So yeah. Quick question. So
Yeah.
I forgot. He's supposed to come on and do like UI or more than UI.
Essentially, like, it's like UI, FX, sound effects, like those linkages. You know, like the I put a part on the car. What happens? You know, like that moment.
Theatrics.
Theatrics. It's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's like that whole wing of shit. But I'm sure he would also want to offer input wherever he feels like map design too. To be honest, like where there's like setting up like the colliders and maps. The bar would be something called technically technical artist. It includes like all of those things.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Didn't ask any technical questions. Seems like a cool dude.
Yeah, yeah. Seems like a cool guy. Definitely got his head like firmly on his shoulders with a lot of the design stuff. Um, I think a lot of it's just about scope, scale, making sure it's a fair and reasonable thing too, because like it's very easy to be like you're an employee but you're also an intern, and it's like, all right,
Yeah.
keep the scope very manageable, and that's why Chris is talking to him right now.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so yeah, we'll see what we will. I'm sure Chris and I'll talk about it more later today. But yeah, so that's pretty much that. Yeah, hopefully. I mean, fingers crossed. I think like he would actually provide like a lot of, like a significant amount of impact in that place. Like, cause it is a lot of work, but it's also just like, it's not a lot of work for somebody who really cares, and like knows how to do it. You know, it's like if you just kind of get it, like you can figure it out. The one thing that will be like it has to sort of work in our pattern, right? Like these things have to be like multiplayer in some instances, these effects, and like so we have to like set up our pattern for him to be able to like slot into and just stick with it, like whether it's event driven or like there's like components that he can create, and just telling him to do instantiations and things like that, and just familiarize. There's like a little onboarding for sure, but I trust KT because KT is quite keen on like not managing him, but like I would say like working most closely with him, and I'll probably work sort of second closest with him, but I trust him to like get him up to speed with like what our environment's like and what we need to do. I also think that's just a good sort of task for KT to do, just in general, just to get him used to the idea of, I would say, running a team, if you want to call it that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Makes sense to me. Yeah, just wanted to check. I totally forgot. I was like, oh shit.
all good.
Yeah.
No, you
Okay,
didn't
cool.
forget. You didn't forget, by the way. I only pinged you like, I actually just pinged you late. Like we were just talking normally about things for like a long time. So when I sent you the message was actually when I wanted you to come in. So you were perfectly on time.
All right, because I figured, I was like, damn.
Yeah.
I left it and came back, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, I forgot. Yeah.
No, it's all good.
Man.
Well, sweet, man. I got to work on finishing some of this customization shit. And
Oh, good.
and if you need anything, let me know.
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm gonna bounce.
Alrighty, man.
Peace.
Well, I'll catch you later. Um, all right. Let's see. Who's online?